This is Hospitality 1-to-1, conversations on the industry with your host, Chris Bennis.
Well, happy holidays from the Hospitality 1-to-1 podcast. Hope you have a great holiday season. And in the gift of giving, if you will, we have got a gift for you. And no, you can't return it. Joining me today is John Carpenter. Now, John is the Director of Operations and Executive Recruiter with Snelling Hospitality. He and I have actually partnered together for the Hospitality 1-to-1 podcast. And today we've put together 6 fantastic podcasts. These are either hospitality or business driven. And so I want to take a couple minutes and talk about these podcasts and explain why we think they're so good. These are great podcasts to listen to on that long car ride to grandmother's house we go. Great opportunity to get informed. John, again, thanks for talking today.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hey, I'm great.
Good.
Oh, my goodness. So let's get kicked right off here. You got
Sure.
some great podcasts here. Let's start off with, how about the first one you have? Let's go into that first and foremost.
I think the first one's been one of our guests, John O Bono. He actually has a fantastic podcast called Lodging Leaders. And in that podcast, John actually helps hoteliers by talking to industry leaders who can honestly make a difference and help people train, as well as he also runs a company called Lodging Metrics, which also does the same. It can help the hoteliers learn about everything that they need to learn about as well. He also actually has a new program coming out about training in hospitality. So he does a lot for the podcast world. He has a lot of different guests, from us as recruiters that have been on there to, marketing people, to GMs, to CEOs. There's just a lot of great wealth of knowledge on John's podcast. Again, that's the Lodging Leaders podcast.
John's great because he actually breaks things down and makes it simple to understand. I mean, it's a great listen, if you will.
Right.
He keeps the conversation going, which is not something to be taken for granted, if you will. So that's, of course, we have the Lodging Leaders podcast with John O Bono.
Mm-hmm.
What's next in the goodie bag?
Again, most industry professionals may know the next gentleman called Glenn Houseman. Glenn actually has had Anthony Melchiori on his podcast a couple different times. He's kind of a generalist when it comes to a podcast. He has different things on each podcast. He doesn't focus every episode on one thing. He might put 2 or 3 or 4 items in each podcast. He also does a few with himself. He'll do some when he's at conventions or shows to talk about how the theme of the show was or the theme of the convention was. And again, he's a fantastic listen as well.
He is. In fact, he has the distinct, privilege of being probably the only person who's more witty than I am, actually. He's got a very quick wit about him. Fantastic. Listen,
and actually, I think to this day, he's one of our top podcast episodes that we've had on.
He is. I mean, fantastic. It's just a great conversation. A quick plug, of course, if you haven't listened to Glenn's podcast, go ahead and check it out on our website, iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Again, a great listen for it. Correct. So if we dig into Santa's bag once more, what's next?
There's a great hotel marketing podcast by Fuel, the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast run by Stuart Butler. It helps hoteliers market their properties. They do a really, really good job of that. They are a marketing company, but they help with just those little tidbits of information that might, elude a lot of us. Now, this one's more about just marketing in general. It's not a generalist podcast. It does just talk about marketing, but they go in depth on a lot of different things.
I mean, terrific. I've had a chance to quickly glance there. I'll be the first to admit I haven't listened as intently as the other ones, but from what I've heard has definitely wet the whistle, and I'll be personally listening to that over my holiday break. So great podcast. And of course, that takes us to yet another tasty treat, if you will, for the holiday season. What's next?
Yeah, this one actually, I don't necessarily know it only has to do with hospitality, but it is from the hospitality realm of things. With the Philadelphia Conventions Bureau, CVB, the PHL Diversity Podcast, hosted by Greg DeShields, who is actually going to be one of our guests coming up, is fantastic. Now, a lot of his guests are out of Philadelphia or that Pennsylvania area, but I have to tell you that when it comes to diversity and inclusion, they knock it out of the park with this one. They honestly feel that that is one of the best ways for hotels, restaurants, travel agencies to grow. And they talk about it, through and through, and how to get there and how to make that a difference. And I think it's a really, really good podcast to listen to for everybody.
I would agree. Spoiler alert, I've already recorded the interview with Greg, which will be running in the new year, of course. Terrific conversation, very engaging. It's something to look forward to as we get into 2018. So again, Greg's a solid guy, great conversation. So let's move, if we can, away from the hotel or hospitality podcast and look more into the general, if you will, business podcasts. And so who do you have you think may be a good listen to start us off from a business standpoint?
Well, I have two. The first one, again, was a guest on our podcast, but he's also a friend of ours, so that is why. John Klimshin, he actually handles a podcast called Your Startup Advisors Podcast, and really kind of bases it around entrepreneurs. And of course, as hoteliers go, or restaurateurs go, or anyone who might run a business, it's always about that entrepreneur. It's always about how you're going to run the business, how you're going to hire, fire, train, do all those kind of things. And John touches on a lot of different things, from venture capitalists all the way down to hiring people. It's been a good podcast for me to listen to when I started to listen to podcasts, and I keep up with him on a regular basis.
John's not only a great podcast, if you will, presenter, he's a great, solid guy. In fact, both John Klimshin and John O Bono both helped, if you will, advise us when we kicked off the Hospitality One-to-One podcast. So just a wealth of knowledge in multiple disciplines. If you haven't had a chance to listen to John Klimshin's appearance on our podcast, I highly recommend going back and listening. It's just a terrific conversation.
Right.
So what's the next one you have?
The next one, I think it's one of the most popular podcasts that is out there, especially for entrepreneurs. It's called Entrepreneurs on Fire, EOF, and it's hosted by John Lee Dumas. And John actually does a really good job of getting fantastic guests on there. He has over 1,500 episodes. He does 7 days a week. Here we are doing 2 a week, and we're going, man, how are we going to get it done? And we've talked to John and all the other people, and they do 1 a week, and they're like, wow, but they do 7 a week. They really, truly find the way to help an entrepreneur think and manage everyday life and business.
7 a week. That's a lot of feeding the beast.
Right.
By the way, quick plug, of course, if you or someone may be looking to appear on the Hospitality One-to-One podcast, let us know. We do 2 a week, but if we get enough guests, we could go to 7. Sure.
Right.
Just
we'll
let
take
us
them
know.
as long as we can.
Just let us know. Operator standing by. Give us a call. No. But anyways, fantastic. Great podcast information there. I'll tell you what, aside from the fact that my earpiece keeps falling out, which I'll work on later, we've provided for you 6 great podcasts, both business and hospitality. But in the infomercial world, there's always, but wait, there's more. We're going to give you, that's right, we're going to give you 8 podcasts for the price of 6.
Correct.
These last 2 are from our personal stash, our little collection. So John's going to give you 1, and then I'm going to give you 1. Consider it an extra special gift from us. So John, what's your extra special podcast?
Actually, Chris, I'll let you go first. I know you're a weather nerd, and I know you love talking about it. So you go right ahead.
It's funny. It's the first time that John's used the word weather nerd. He usually drops the word weather. So, don't let the looks fool you. I am a nerd. No, actually, it is a podcast. It's a terrific podcast. Been around for years. It's called Weather Brains. And it's for people who enjoy weather. It's led by a meteorologist out of Alabama named James Spann. He's like the Michael Jordan, if you will, or LeBron James of weather meteorology or TV meteorology people. Just a terrific guy. And he brings on a wide assortment of both panelists and guests. Some of the conversation does go over my head, which isn't, I dropped my earpiece, which isn't saying much, but it is a great podcast. Great listen. Again, they've been around for years. A couple, over 100, I think, podcasts they've got going on right now. It's a great listen, and it is educational, but it's also engaging too. It's not dry.
Good.
So again, Weather Brains is the name of the podcast. James Spann, he is available on his website, of course, and he is also on iTunes as well. So that's my podcast. John, what is your winner?
Mine is somebody who really truly believes that content is king. Not only do I listen to his daily podcast as often as he puts it out, but as also watch his YouTube channel videos, is Gary Vaynerchuk, and as he pronounces it, Vaynerchuk. His Gary V audio experience I listen to on the way into work, and then when I'm at lunch or at home, I'll watch his YouTube channel. And honestly, Gary's pretty inspiring. He's a pretty inspiring dude, and he really honestly feels that if you're not creating or documenting your experiences, you really should, especially if you want to brand yourself and you want to be that next James Spann, if you want to be that, you got to be able to document and guarantee that you can get yourself done. And Gary does a really, really good job of just doing that and running his own shows, and he's got a good staff. So it's really entertaining to me, and I do like it a lot. He's written a couple books as well, and they're just great books. He's just an all-around good guy. So that's another one. So Gary Vaynerchuk, and most people are going to know who that is when it comes to it. So yeah,
these are great podcasts to listen to, and I will say, it goes without saying, we've given you some great suggestions and tips, and we're glad that you're, of course, if you will, tuned in to listen to ours. We always recommend to keep an eye on what else is out there. Of course, there's always great new podcasts. What we're going to do is we're going to list for you all of the podcasts that we've talked about: the hospitality, the business, and yes, our own personal favorites as well, on the Hospitality 1-to-1 podcast, or 101.com website, if you will. Again, we've had a lot of fun here, been kind of lighthearted, but from the bottom of our hearts to yours, we wish you and your families a happy, safe, and healthy holiday season. And again, we look forward to being with you throughout much of 2018. Again, happy holidays, everyone.